So let's begin. Hello, I'm Lisa Chapman, class of 81, MBA from the Yale School of Management and Service President of 1stGenYale. We welcome you tonight to Plan to Prosper at Yale and Beyond, our inaugural personal financial planning series, which is co-sponsored by the Yale Club of Washington, DC, the Yale Latino Alumni Network, and Yale Fin. And this presentation is for all alumni and students across Yale. I want to give a shout out to the 1stGenYale chapter, co-led by Barb Petrosio, who's here tonight. Barb, and I want to wave, thank you. And member alum Eric N., and as well as graduating alumni college senior Albert Lee, all who serve on the planning committee and have done a lot of work for this series. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Over 110 alumni and students have registered, and you represent Yale College, the GNP schools, and come from across the country and internationally as well. Over the last 2 years, many members of 1stGenYale have asked us if we could put on an event focusing on personal financial planning. A lot of people would like advice and strategies of what to do with their own personal resources. So we are thrilled tonight to have Elisabeth Anton and to give a speech and presentation on the program today of Planning to Prosper at Yale and Beyond. This is our very first program of credit and cash flow management. We have 2 more programs in the works. One is Investing 101 in April, and the second is Retirement Savings in May. I'd like to know if David Sanchez is here. David, are you here yet? Great. Let me introduce my good friend, David Sanchez, who's head of the Yale Latino Alumni Network and one of our co-sponsors of this program today. David, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Lise. I first met Lise when she joined the Yale Board of Governors. And after answering the first 1,000 questions, I saw a pattern. Not so much why, but why not? And you could just see the fire in her, and she's produced so much for Yale, and Stanford is the only person I know that's won both the Yale and the Stanford medal, and has done 4 times more than anyone would require to get that award. What's really important also is the collaboration that we're having among all the different clubs and SIGs to reinforce each other and to create economies of scale. I see a lot of our former Yale Latino Alumni Network directors, Ben, Barb, and others who have gone on and continued to play roles throughout the Yale platforms. The Yale Latino Alumni Network was created a few years ago for the purpose of being a conduit and a source of resources for our Yale Latino alumni, but we're very inclusive. It's one of the things we made very clear from the beginning. We believe that any Yale alumni can join us, with us, be a part of what we're doing, and we also are very eager to be part of anyone else in terms of helping them achieve their goals. So with that, thank you so much, and I look forward to the presentation. Elisabeth, by the way, is a member of the board of Wyland.
Thank you, David. Now I'm thrilled to introduce our 2 speakers tonight. I first met Elisabeth, who participated in our 1stGenYale inaugural conference, Blazing the Trail being the first, way back in April, if you can believe it, 2018. And from that moment on, Elisabeth has been a very active member of 1stGenYale ever since. Elisabeth Anton is from the class of 89 at Silliman College, is a proud 1st-gen low-income Yale graduate, and also has an MBA in finance from the Wharton Business School. Her banking experience is vast, including experiences at Merrill Lynch in London, Credit Suisse in Madrid, and Hong Kong Shanghai Bancorp in Dubai. She is a licensed investment advisor representative with the Series 7, Series 63, and Series 65. Elisabeth is founder and president of Sherwood Financial Group. Welcome, Elisabeth. Next, I'd like to introduce Falake Fadomi, class of 18, MBA, fellow, Yale School of Management, is a consultant with experience in leading insurance transformations. She serves on the board of the Yale Club of Washington, DC, and leads the club's effort in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you, Falake, for being here. Where's Falake? There you go. Now I'd like to read just the compliance language which is required. Elisabeth Anton offers securities and advisory services through Centaurus Financial Inc., member FIRA and CPAC, a registered investment advisor. This is not an offer to sell securities, which may be done only after properly delivery of a prospectus and client suitability is renewed and determined. Information related to securities is intended for use by individuals residing in California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Virginia, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Indiana, and Michigan. Sherwood Financial Group and Centaurus Financial are not affiliated. 1stGenYale and all the co-sponsors do not give an opinion or recommendation to these services. Now it is my honor and privilege to turn the rest of the program over to Falaki. Falaki, thank you.
Thanks, Lise. I'm so excited about this session. Shout out to the Yale Club of Washington, D.C. members on the call. The club is so excited to co-sponsor this program. Elisabeth will lead the discussion and share facts and leading practices around cash flow management. As we go through the presentation, please capture your questions in the chat. I would be monitoring the questions, and we'll have a Q&A session towards the latter part of the program. The goal is definitely to make this interactive, so we have baked some time towards the end of the program for that. So with that, Elisabeth, I am so excited to be on this platform with you. I've been privy to hearing your story and your journey, and it's remarkable. Can you please share some background and experience, your background and experience while you were at Yale, and how that has informed your journey to date?
Let me unmute. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you to everyone who worked so hard to get this program up and running. First and foremost, I want to thank my assistant, Albert Lee, who is a freshman. He's a senior. He's graduating in this May. And I think when I say he's a freshman, it's one of those Freudian slips, because I'm going to be losing him come May. But thank you, Lise. Thank you, Falaki. Thank you, Barb. This has been so much fun, and I can't wait to get going. So you want to know about my background and experience whilst I was at Yale? Was that the question? Okay. Well, I would say I was born into a Cuban, Puerto Rican, Ecuadorian family. And I was born in the Bronx. My grandparents didn't really speak English. And my dad, he left when I was pretty young. So my mother kept food on the table by working as a secretary for a bank in Manhattan. I know what it's like to eat lentil soup for 4 or 5 days in a row at the end of the month before our next paycheck. We moved to Puerto Rico when I was a kid. So I grew up there, really. And when I got to Yale, I experienced a very deep culture shock on a lot of levels: social, cultural, intellectual, economic. I became aware of just how poor we were. And this made me feel really ashamed and really less than. Back in the 80s, there was no first gen community for support. Falaki?
Yeah, no, thanks, Elisabeth, for sharing that. We understand that, there are definitely unique challenges facing underserved communities. Given your experience as well as your journey, what brought you to where you are today, based on some of that?
Well, let's see. So when I went to business school, and when I graduated from business school, I went into banking. And I worked internationally for my entire career. I left banking in 2010. And I did that so that I could finally indulge in my very first love, which was writing. So for a number of years after that, I wrote. I spent my time writing. And when I moved back to New Haven about 4 years ago and met Lise, discovered that there was such a thing as first gen, I came back, in fact, to work on a writing project for Yale. When the pandemic struck, I remember very clearly waking up. It was about 2 or 3 days after we'd gone into lockdown. And I woke up one morning and sat down at my computer to write, and I couldn't, because all I kept thinking about was, oh my God, the people that are going to get hit the hardest by this pandemic are my people, my peeps, right? All the Black and brown and first gens out there who haven't had the benefit of financial advisory. They didn't grow up in families that spent dinners, talking about the stock market, right? These are the people that were going to pay the price. And so I thought, I have to do something. I have to do something. And I remembered distantly that I had finance skills. And that even though I wasn't a doctor or a nurse and I couldn't really help on the front lines, I could help people manage their money. And so that's how I came up with the idea of opening Sherwood. And my mission has always been to provide resources and support for people who have never had the benefit of these resources before. So that's how I am. That's what I do, and that's why I'm here today.
Oh, very inspiring. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Before we transition to the details, what are some of the key takeaways we should listen out for in your presentation?
The key takeaway is that it's really, setting up your financial system, sort of getting the foundations of your financial system in place at the earliest age you possibly can will set you up for the rest of your life to become prosperous. However it is that you define prosperity, it is the financial choices that you make today that will enable you to reach those goals for the rest of your life. That's the key takeaway.
Well, thank you, Elisabeth. We'll transition now to your presentation, and we look forward to hearing more.
Okay. All righty. Here we go. So the first thing we're going to spend some time talking about are emotions, the emotions around money. Because we know that there are many. Money is such a charged issue. And most of that comes from the way we grew up and the ideas, the perspectives, the values that we were taught around money, and we sort of absorbed them growing up. And I have met many, many, many people over the course of my life, and this even includes some of my peers at Wharton, who, when they're great with numbers, but if you put a dollar sign in front of the number, all of a sudden, there's a paralysis, there's a challenge, there's an obstacle. And so a lot of the work I do is around figuring that out, helping people figure out what their money issues are, right? What are the challenges? Why are they afraid of financial planning? And so I thought I would tell you, this is two things we're going to do with this slide. I'm going to tell you a story about a short story about how I grew up and some of the values that I grew up absorbing from my family and how those have set me up to be very challenged around money. And whilst I do that, what I would like you guys to do in the audience is I would like you to sort of take a look at some of the bullet points on the slide and see if you can identify with some of those emotions, some of those aspects of your fear around money. And I want you to write them in the chat. If you can sort of, whichever ones you identify with, whatever reasons you have for feeling intimidated or challenged or afraid of your finances, write them in the chat. Albert is going to collect those over the course of the presentation and collate them and put them into some charts that we can look at and see what are some of the major themes that come up. So whilst you do that, I'm going to tell you a little story. When I grew up in Puerto Rico, And I was very fortunate to be to have gotten scholarships to be able to go to American international schools, American private schools. And it was obviously very life-changing for me to be able to do that. But I did spend almost my entire school career feeling very much less than, because I was the poor kid on scholarship. And the parents of most of my friends could afford to buy them things that my parents couldn't, or my mother couldn't. So I became very industrious, very sort of entrepreneurial as a young kid. I was the kid who sold lemonade on this corner stand, and I would put, I'd put coloring in it to sell pink lemonade at a premium. I crocheted pot holders and sold them door to door. I delivered newspapers, anything I could do. And in those days, when you opened a bank account, what they would give you is they would give you a little booklet into which they would write the amount of your deposit and stamp it. And every week, the highlight of my week was to go on Saturday morning to get my booklet stamped with that week's earnings. And one day, my mother took me aside with my growing bank account. I think I had about $300. Can you imagine? And she took me aside and suggested that I give half of it to my brother, because he was about a year and a half younger than me, and he wasn't working to earn money. You can imagine how well that went down. And when I refused, my mother patiently taught me or told me that I was being selfish, and that wanting to hoard my money would make me very greedy, and that I, wanting to buy all those things that I wanted to buy, clothing, shoes, perfume, that was materialistic. And so all of those things were bad. And I remember feeling really angry and really ashamed that I wanted to buy things and I wanted to have things. And I was, ashamed that I wasn't supposed to be really doing that. So you can see with that little story, you can imagine the kinds of messages that I grew up with, and the shame that even today, when I say out loud, I want to earn money, I want to make a lot of money, I want to be rich, these statements for me are actually quite difficult. And so I tell you that just so that to give you an idea of how you can dig in to your past and excavate a little bit around your relationship to money. Because until we normalize money's place in our lives, it's just a tool. It's a tool with which we can create the life we want. That's all. And, it takes quite a bit, I think, of emotional work to sort of create a healthy relationship to money. So that's all I'm going to say. And if you could keep putting stuff in the chat, that would be great.
Yeah, scarcity is one that has been highlighted in the chat, Elisabeth.
Has it?
Overwhelmed, taboo, culture, shame, debt, inferior. It really resonates with some of the points you teased out.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think, we're all the same. These issues, and it doesn't even matter, I have discovered in my work, it doesn't matter if you make $500,000 a year, or if you make $50,000 a year, if you make $15,000 a year, these issues trail you for life. So it's, as part of creating a foundation for yourself that is going to allow you to build the life you want, you need to heal your relationship to money. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is spending. Spending. All right. How much does it cost to be me? I ask this is the first question I ask whenever I work with someone. How much does it cost to be you? You'd be surprised. People kind of do this. People kind of go, and Well, what does it mean? It means, you know, you need to figure out on some level how much your life costs you, how much it costs to be in the life that you are. It's the first step to financial wellness. Well, I suppose the second step is really healing your relationship to money. But then the second step is, okay, we've got to figure out how much it costs to be me. And how much is it going to cost to build the life you want? So let's see, and the next slide is going to show you how you do this. Tracking my spending. Who wants to track their spending? Nobody. Nobody. It's a nightmare. But it is the only way, it's the only way one can ever figure out how much it costs to be them. I pulled up a little survey by the Penny Hoarder, and I put this up on the screen just to give you an idea. If you're not tracking your spending, you're not alone, right? Over 56% of Americans say they don't know how much money they spent last month, and over 55% don't use a budget to manage their income. So, you know, that 1 out of every 2 of you on the call, right, is part of this general cultural phenomenon. And I know for me, it took a very long time before I was willing to start tracking my money. And I think a lot of that was that I was maybe afraid. I was afraid to really see sort of in hard numbers how much money I was spending on Starbucks. So I think though this is daunting, there are lots of apps out there that facilitate this, make it easy. Back in the day, we had to write it all down, what we were spending, keeping track that way. Now you can just use apps that hook your accounts together, and it does it for you. And I'll talk about those resources at the end of the presentation. Okay, let's get into the meat, sort of the meat of the program. This is, we're going to talk about income. All right, so the first step in figuring out how much it costs to be you, to be me, is to calculate your net worth. What does that mean? Net worth is really assets minus liabilities. And I know we think of net worth as it's a term that's thrown out about rich people. Oh, you know, Bill Gates has a net worth of, 18 billion or whatever it is. Is that really lowballing him? I'm not sure. But really, it's not for rich people. Everybody has a net worth. It's assets minus liabilities. What are assets? Assets are like valuable possessions that you own. It's that simple. Your cash balances, your savings accounts, your retirement investments, your car, your house, your boat, your art collection, your expensive ski equipment. Those are assets. Liabilities are things you owe, not things you own, things you owe, and something that you're responsible for paying. So liabilities tend to be drains, obviously, on your net worth, and you want to minimize them and get rid of them as quickly as you can. All sorts of loans, mortgages, it's your debt. People frequently ask me, can something be an asset and a liability at the same time? And the answer is yes, because your house, if you've got a mortgage, that's both an asset and a liability. The asset is the part of the mortgage you've paid off, and the liability is the part that you still owe. Okay, so this is actually, this would take you maybe a half hour to do this, to calculate this, and it's really critical to understand. It's one of the pieces of the foundation. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about here is disposable income. What is disposable income? It is the income that you have at your disposition after taxes, right? So when you get your paycheck, your taxes are usually taken out off the top, right? Your federal income tax, your state income tax, your Social Security tax, and your Medicare tax. Those are gone. And that's not your money. right? So it's not disposable for your spending. It's not available for your spending. However, there are oftentimes other things that are deducted from your paycheck. Your retirement plan stuff, meaning your 401k, if you've got one, or 403b, right? Your health insurance oftentimes is deducted right out of there. Your life insurance can also be deducted right out. When you are calculating your disposable income, you need to actually add those back in, because those are actually choices you've made, right? You've made a choice to invest in your retirement plan. You've made a choice to pay for health insurance, to pay for life insurance. So to get a true number for disposable income, it's not just enough to say it's my paycheck. You have to be more robust. You need to add stuff back in, but it definitely is after-tax income. So I just sort of put these here. I used a 24% effective tax rate just to give you, a sense of what it is I was talking about. So your disposable income in this example here would be 76%, okay? Of, let's say you make 100,000, so $76,000 is your disposable income, and that would include adding back in all of your retirement stuff and all the other deductions. All right? Okay. This is my favorite part here, the 50-30-20 rule. I read a book quite some time ago written by Senator Elisabeth Warren. She wasn't a senator back then, but she wrote this book called All You're Worth, The Ultimate Lifetime Money Plan. And she wrote it with her daughter, and it essentially was designed as a rough rule of thumb for working class families to plan their spending. And when I first read this, I remember thinking, oh, thank goodness. Thank you for telling me how it is that I'm supposed to be apportioning my disposable income. So this is, if we go back to the example of the last slide where you had, let's say, $76,000 at your disposition, right, after tax, then that $76,000, that's what we have here. And that's the money that you would be dividing into three pieces of the pie. 50% are your needs. What are your needs? They're your fixed monthly expenses, the ones that are necessary for survival. Your rent, your car payments, your groceries, right? Your insurance, your health care, your clothing, utilities, and your debt payments. They come out of this bucket of 50%. The 20% is your financial goals. Those financial goals would be retirement and savings. And those savings, we'll talk about that on the next slide, what this 20% looks like. And then your 30% of that 76,000 is your discretionary income. And I want to make a distinction. I want to point out here that discretionary income is not disposable income. It's two separate things, and they often get conflated, right? Mm-hmm. Discretionary income is your fun money. This is for your wants. This is your cable. This is your going out to dinner. This is your, this is the money that you have to spend as you like. All right. I call it the fun money. So I hope this is clear. And again, I'll put this book on my resource. It's on my resource page.
So Elisabeth, quick question on wants and needs. A lot of times people struggle with really getting crystal clear on what is a want and what is a need. Just based on your experience, how have you helped clients logically think through it?
That's a great question. And thanks for that. It's hard, right? Because you think, I need clothing, right? You have to buy clothing, right? But is it a need or is it a want, right? And I would say it's both, right? So for me, at this stage in my life, My clothing, I put that in my needs section. I have a specific budget and I go out and add a couple of pieces to my wardrobe every year. But when I was in my 20s and 30s, I really cared about my clothing. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways in which I spend my money. But back then, I was having to, in addition to minimum the minimum amount I spent on clothes, for underwear and basic things. Well, I had a whole budget for extra clothing, and that came under discretionary. So I would say they're non-essentials, quality of life additions, right? Optional spending, movies, dining out, sporting events, vacations, that all comes from your discretionary. Okay? Does that
Very
answer your
helpful.
question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All righty. It's a tough one. I mean, people say to me, I have people I work with say, yeah, but my cable, that's a need. I'm like, right? Is it? So it's different for everyone. Okay, so let's talk about that 20%, because this is the 20% that is going to transform your life. This 20% is what Elizabeth Warren calls your financial goals. And I go into more depth. I found that I needed to kind of dig deeper into what exactly, how to apportion my financial goals. And what I do is I split it in half between investing and saving. So that 20% of my disposable income, I split it into 10% goes into savings accounts and 10% goes towards investments. Okay. Here we talk about it in a little more detail. So you can see on the left, I have a savings pie. That's that 10% that goes into savings. So what exactly should go into savings? That 10%. That would be the 10% of the 76, right? In the original example. So 7,600. Okay. In there, I would have two separate accounts. We'll talk about that later, with my short-term goals. Any short-term goals that I'm saving for, I need to put into savings account. One savings account for, let's say my short-term goals are, and I define short-term, this is my definition, for 1 and 2 years. I like to keep it at 1 year, but some of them sometimes stretch into 2, but fine. So for me, what are some of my short-term goals? I like to take vacation, let's say 1 vacation a year, and I like to save up for charitable spending. I like to have a little budget at the end of my year for Christmas and I apportion, and I sort of then have a pile of money that I've saved, and I invest, I send that to charity, my favorite charities. So those 2 goals are yearly goals, and they go into a savings account. My emergency fund, okay, goes into a separate account, that is a completely separate account. And I do that for psychological reasons. Now, if you have not begun to put your emergency fund together, I recommend that you spend 50% of that saving bucket on building up that emergency fund. People define emergency funds quite differently. For me, 3 months salary is great. And I like it to be gross salary, not net, just to give myself a cushion. And once that is funded, it may take a couple of years, right? Then you have all of your savings for other things, right? But that is really quite fundamental for you to do.
So Elisabeth, can you just elaborate a bit on the gross salary versus net? Because would you consider your contributions to 401k or other deductions as part of that? Or is it, can you just elaborate in terms of what that is?
Sure. Gross means adding your tax back in. That's essentially what it is. And so disposable income as we talked about, is what you have after Uncle Sam takes his money. That's your net income. That's what's called net income. Your gross income is what you make, your salary, before Uncle Sam takes his money. So let's say you make a salary of $75,000 a year. Well, when you actually, right after taxes, let's say you're in a 25% tax bracket, so that is much less, right? That's the difference. The difference is before tax is taken out and after tax. And so I like, just to be safe, I like to save 3 months of my total salary, total monthly salary, my gross salary, in an account, which usually gives me about 4 months worth of savings. Is that better? Yeah.
Very helpful. Yes.
Okay, great. And then, so on the investment side of this, you can see, again, 10%, and you would put a certain percentage into your retirement accounts. And I won't talk about that here because that's going to be the subject of the third webinar, right, in May. We're going to talk all about retirement and retirement planning. But for now, just know that out of the 10% of the 76%, right, of your disposable income, a bit of it goes into retirement, and then a bit of it goes into funding your long-term goals. Now, what are long-term goals? Planning for a wedding, buying a house. For me, it was always a sabbatical. I always like to take a sabbatical every few years, right? And so I would plan on saving enough money to fund myself for 6 months, let's say. And I define long-term goals as between 3 and 5 plus years. And the reason why, and again, this is just me, different advisors say different things, but for me, anything that it goes beyond 2 years in terms of a savings horizon should be put into the market, because it would be sitting too long into an account that is getting eaten away by inflation and not earning any interest. Now, of course, there's always a risk when you put money into the market. And again, I won't talk about that too much because that's the subject of the next webinar in April. But just for now, that 10% apportioned to investing gets split between retirement and long-term goals. Okay, now we finally get to the fun part. We've talked about essential spending, your needs. We've talked about your financial goals, right? And now we're going to talk about your discretionary spending. So, as I said, discretionary spending is one portion of your disposable income, right? And it is the part that is fun. This is the part that once you have sort of apportioned your 50% and your 20%, now you can have fun. Now you can do whatever the heck you want with your money. And let's talk about what that looks like. Conscious spending. I love this term, and I first learned about it when I read a book by an economist named Lorana Rain. She wrote a book in the maybe about 10 years ago, called Conscious Spending, Conscious Life. And Dr. Rain is an economist, and she was looking at consumerist culture in America and the effects of unconscious spending, consumerism. And, you know, what I took away from this book is 2 definitions, right? What does it mean? Conscious spending. It means creating alignment in your life between your money and who you are by connecting your values to your money in a purpose-driven plan. And that's the plan that we're constructing right now, right? That allows you to stay in control of your money and your life. creating alignment in your life by connecting your values to your money in a purpose-driven plan that allows you to stay in control. Okay, that's the official definition of conscious spending. The way I always say it to people is, it means you can spend extravagantly on the things you love and cut costs mercilessly on the things you don't. It's that simple. And what this is essentially getting at, this is what this is requiring you to do, is to figure out, who am I? What do I care about? What do I value? And who do I want to be? Right? What kind of life do I want to live? And how am I going to fund that life? And essentially, this book, it's not even talking about how to manage your money, because a lot of personal finance books, I find, talk about managing your money and giving you techniques. This book talks about managing yourself, right? Really coming to terms with who you are and how to become who you want to be. And anyway, this book will also be in my resources if you're interested. You know, all this may sound like common sense, right? Because it does. But you would be amazed at how much money we spend on things that we do not value. I'm sure if we go back, and which is what I hope you do, and you analyze your spending for 2021, you are almost certain to find stuff that you bought that you could care less about. And usually these purchases are really small individually. And it's only in retrospect that we see the huge chunk out of our life that they take. So really, okay, I'll leave it there. I mean, we'll talk more about conscious spending, and this for me is a real cornerstone of how I define the quality of my life. Let's go to the next slide. I love this slide. And I think the point here that I'm trying to make is that when you become conscious about your spending and make it value driven, okay, you are able to live a life filled with joy, feeling free, and feeling quite intentional about how you're living your life. It's all about values. And let me talk a little bit. You can see I put a big cross through budget, because people think about budgeting all the time and like they just zone out. They just kind of, you know, they don't want to hear about it. It's horrible. Who lives by a budget? I don't. I can't budget. I've tried. And every time I say I'm going to spend this much, guess what? There's enough of a rebel in me that I have to spend more. And that just, for years, it didn't work. And I think what I learned is that my idea of budgeting was draconian, cutting back on all my spending. And that's kind of like trying to lose 100 pounds in a month. It's like you decide you're going to go on a diet, you want to lose 15 pounds. And so you're going to cut your calories down for the next 4 weeks to 1,000 calories a day. How long are you going to stay on that diet? The same thing with working out, right? We're going to go work out for an hour every day. Well, yeah, 4 days later. And managing your finances is the same sort of thing. It needs to be small increments that together make huge differences. They compound. And we'll talk about compounding in our next webinar. But this is, compounding is a very fundamental concept in understanding how tiny little changes, tiny little steps mushroom into enormous results on lots of levels. So what I'd like you to do here, if you could, we won't dwell much on this, but I would like you in the audience to write down 5 things, write them in the chat, 5 things that you love that you actually spend money on. 5 things that you love that you spend money on. And then I want you to think about 5 things that you don't really care that much about, that you don't love, that you also spend money on. 5 things that you spend money on that you love, and 5 things that you spend money on that you really don't care much about. Because once you begin to, and then Albert will collect these in the chat and put them into a graph for us. And so I'm going to move on whilst you do that. The next thing we're going to talk about is banks, right? We've got an idea of what our money looks like. And so now where are we going to put it? All right. I recommend putting your money into 3 separate financial institutions. Why? Well, because each of the types of accounts that you need do different things. And banks, most banks that offer all these 3 different types of accounts or 4 different types of accounts are pretty mediocre, right? I'm looking for the best account for the thing that I needed to do at that institution. And I also do it for psychological reasons, and I'll explain that in a minute. So in Bank One, I use a big national bank. You open your checking account, and into that, right, comes your paycheck. And then at that same bank, you would open, this is what I do, your savings accounts for your short-term goals. This would be your vacations, for me, my charitable giving, whatever it is that you are saving for that year. And you would open one account and then 2 sub accounts, one for each goal. And then in another bank entirely, you would look for a savings account that is maybe like a money market account, and that is for your emergency fund. That is, and I do that for psychological reasons. I don't want to see it, and it's in a different bank. I'm not looking at it hardly ever, and and month by month by month, it's accumulating. And once you've accumulated it, it just sits there and accrues interest. And then, of course, for your investments, you have retirement accounts, and then you have brokerage accounts. And your brokerage accounts, and we won't talk about this today because it's going to be in the next couple of webinars, but in those brokerage accounts, you would put money for your long-term goals. All right. I hope that that's clear. This slide, I love this slide because it makes everything so easy. You can see that your checking account is the backbone of your automated personal financial system. And that's how I really want you to see it. This is my personal financial system. And the key to this is automation. Now, back in the day, we didn't have such a thing as automation. You guys are incredibly lucky. There's automatic everything. So let's start from the beginning. You get your paycheck, and that paycheck goes into your checking account. Now, before I continue, let me just pause for a minute. Your paycheck is not your disposable income. Remember that, because I'm guessing that out of your paycheck already before you get it is your 401k payment, maybe your life insurance payment, right? And so for the purpose of understanding what your disposable income is and doing the percentages, you need to add that stuff back in. But here we're just dealing with your paycheck. So your paycheck goes in by direct deposit, and out of your paycheck, out of your checking account, let's say on the 5th of the month, you have automatic transfers scheduled to go out to your savings accounts. That would be in the same bank, right? And you can see here from your savings goes automatically into your 2 sub accounts with your goal 1 and your goal 2. On that day, on the 5th, you also are transferring money automatically into your emergency fund at a different bank, right? All this is done you set it up once and it happens automatically. Let's say on the 15th, all your bills are due, your credit card bills, and your investments, your retirement, all this stuff, you've already apportioned it. You already understood how much is going into your retirement accounts. Boom. Actually, this, unless you have a Roth or a traditional IRA, you don't even have to do this part because it's already coming out of your paycheck, right? Your investments for your long-term goals, that would go straight into your brokerage accounts. You have some bills that you can't pay with a credit card. I recommend paying all of your bills with credit cards and then paying off your credit cards every month. Using your credit card as a debit card is a key to financial freedom. And we'll talk about credit cards in more detail later. But you can see that all of these payments, you would set them once, and they happen automatically for you. And this is the backbone. This is the foundation of how you're going to manage and stay in control of your finances.
Elisabeth, this is great. Thanks for sharing. We have 5 minutes before we transition to Q&A. So I know we have a few more topics to get through, and it looks like we have some really good questions that have come through that we'll like to connect on.
So if we have 5 minutes, then I need to cut out a portion of the talk. So I mean, I was going to talk about credit, and then I was going to talk about debt. Those are the 2 next topics. So what I might do is just skip credit and then go straight to debt. How does that sound?
Let's do that.
All right. So here, someone asked me, I think it was Barb, someone asked me, how do I choose a bank? Choosing a bank should be a value-driven process with long-term planning goals. I think it's easy to just walk into a bank and just open an account without thinking through what you need from a bank, okay? I recommend that this be a process that you're very intentional about. Some of the criteria to sort of think about is trust. Do I trust this bank? For me, trust is a process. And I know that I can trust my bank when I call them if there's been a mistake on my account, and they instantly fix it. Convenience, for me, I need to be able to manage everything online and also internationally. So those are some of the things that I look for. Feature-wise, I need to have ATMs that are easy for me to access and don't charge me money. So I think the criteria will be different for everyone, but definitely make sure that you are working with an institution with which you can build trust. Avoid teaser rates, avoid anything that is short-term. When a bank will say, oh, if you open an account with us, we'll give you $200 in your account, or we'll give you a really good interest rate for the first 6 months. Well, stay away from all of that, because what you're looking for long-term, you're looking for really long-term relationship with this bank, and you don't care about 6 months, right? You care about in 6 years, are they going to be giving you value? Minimum balances, you don't need to open an account with anybody who tries to force you to keep a minimum balance in. Otherwise, if you go beneath the balance, they charge you fees, they charge you penalties. Just walk away. Most banks don't even charge do that anymore. Credit card bundles, again, if they offer you a credit card, if you open an account, we'll give you this credit card. Well, that you think, ooh, actually, your credit card, we're going to have to skip that for today, sadly, but your credit card choice needs to be as intentional or more than your bank, than choosing your bank. And so never do that. Never take cards that come with other things without reading. You have to read the fine print and make sure that card is doing what you need it to do for you. So I'm not going to go into the different kinds of banks. I think retail bank is the kind of bank that we generally use, we the public. But I want to say 2 words about credit unions. I am living in New Haven and I have a business. And so I use a fourth bank, and that is my local credit union. And the reason I do that is because credit unions, savings and loan associations, community development banks, these are banks that are really embedded in the community. And they offer a lot of features that are community friendly. And for my business, I'm very focused on the community, and I want to be able to work with an institution that is going to incentivize me for doing that. So just a shout out for credit unions there. Community development banks also are terrific. They work a lot with underserved communities. So sadly, we're going to skip over the credit.
Elisabeth, one option in the chat, a lot of folks would love to hear more from you. So we can quickly do a round robin on the questions and then come back to credit. Or if you can quickly go through credit, we'll give you another 7 minutes to wrap it up and do Q&A starting at 8:10.
Okay, well, sure. All right, so I'll speak quickly. I'm sorry, you can always reach out to me. You can always reach out to me, and these slides are going to be on my website, so don't worry. All right. So why is credit important? Credit is important because it is impossible to build a financial profile in this country without credit. Credit creates a positive feedback loop in that the better credit you have, the lower borrowing costs will be offered to you, which enhances your lifetime savings, right? So what does this mean in particular? Well, it means that when you go to get insurance for your car, your rates are lower if you have good credit. If you go to buy a house, your mortgage rates, much lower if you've got good credit. Credit cards will offer you lower rates if you've got good credit and higher credit limits. So, I won't say much more about it. Those are the three major credit bureaus that report on you. I think so the takeaway from this slide, paying less interest on any of your debt is going to save you a lot of money over the course of your life, which is why building your credit score is one of the smartest financial moves you can make. All right, let me move on quickly. So what affects my credit score? Okay, quickly. The highest credit score you can possibly get is 850. Now, you don't need to have 850. If you're within this green range here, very good and excellent. I say anything over, say, 725, that's good enough. This credit is really something where good enough is good enough. So the things that affect your credit score as you're building it, your payment history. If you pay, they check, they're hawks about making payments every single month on time for all of your credit cards, your loans, everything. Don't miss a payment, don't be late. Credit utilization, what does that mean? It means if you take a total figure of all of your all of your loans and credit cards, the money that you have the capacity to borrow, that is your total credit amount. And if they see that you're using more than 30% of all your credit, it's bad, very bad on your credit. So you have to make sure that if you've got $1,000 on a credit card, you keep that below 300 in borrowing. Credit history length, the longer you have your credit cards, the much better. Hard inquiries. A hard inquiry is whenever you're applying for anything and someone is going to check your credit report, that's a hard inquiry. They pull your report and that's reported. So when you apply for a credit card, they do a hard inquiry and that's recorded. And if you have more than two, it's bad. So you have to be very intentional about what you're opening when. Derogatory remarks. If you've been bankrupt, if you have a lien on your house, if you never paid a credit card and just threw it away, that is all collected on your credit report and it's really bad. And then your total credit cards, you really shouldn't have very many. And you should have a moderate amount, not very many. These things all count on your credit report. A couple of ways in which you can improve your credit score. You want to pay your cards in full each month. I can't stress this enough. You need to use your credit cards like debit cards. You pay it, and this is the only way, this is the only thing that ever keeps me living in my means. If I know I have to pay it at the end of the month. Some people prepay their balances. That's a very effective way of making sure that you're never overspending. You can co-sign with someone who has a higher credit score. Oftentimes parents will, with their children. A friend of mine has an 18-year-old freshman and gave her a credit card so that she could use it for emergencies. So co-signing comes with risks because parents are responsible if they're not paid. So that might be a risky one, but it is an effective way of starting off your credit. Keep your cards open, make sure they don't close, and make sure that you're disputing wrong information. You've got to keep on top of your credit reports. You can get them for free on several apps, and that again will be on my resource page. Make sure, a really important thing, your credit needs to be a diversified set of loans and accounts. So it's not really enough to have just credit cards. You need to have maybe student loans, a mortgage, different kinds of debt is very favorable because it shows that you are capable of managing lots of different types of payments. The last slide for credit, I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit quickly. Are credit cards for me? We tend to just assume everybody has credit cards. And I can say that they are the most efficient way to establish credit. You open a credit card, you've started establishing credit. You need to be very mindful about why you're opening credit cards and for what. Like your bank, like what do you need from a credit card? So some of the criteria for choosing good credit cards is look at your spending habits. What do you spend on? What do you need a credit card to spend for? Your reward objectives. We're not going to really talk about rewards in this presentation, but as we all know, credit cards come with lots of different kinds of incentives and rewards. And so you need to be intentional about what kinds of rewards are important for me. Do I travel a lot? Do I need a card for points for airfares? And then you want to look at the card features and the fees. Make sure you read the fine print. It's very easy to just get the card. And of course, the fine print is really very, very fine, but read it. The types of credit cards, direct cash back. I have 2%. Reward points for the different things that are important to you. And sometimes credit cards will give you instant discounts at retailers. The risks are enormous, and I can't stress this enough. I want to say that when you get credit cards, the biggest risk is the plastic versus cash syndrome. That's what I call it. Because when you're paying cash, you feel that cash leaving your fingertips. When you don't, when you're just flashing plastic, there's a divorce that happens between your true sense of net worth and this inflated sense of your net worth, of how much you have, how much you can spend. It's so easy, right? And then if you're not paying your credit cards even at the end of the month, now you're overspending. And now you're accumulating debt. And now those interest rates that are 22%, 25%, they are killing you. And so this is a vicious cycle if you get into it. And there are penalties if you don't pay on time, if you miss payments, and you can see that all of this means you're going to have bad credit. And having bad credit, as we've seen, is really detrimental to building prosperity, lasting prosperity. So that's it for credit cards. We can talk, I have just 2 slides on debt. I'll go really quickly. Lots of people ask me, what is good debt and what is bad debt? Okay, there is such a thing. Good debt is the kind of debt that you go into that increases your net worth over time. These are appreciating assets. What is an example? Borrowing for your own business, getting a small business loan, borrowing for your education, getting student loans, borrowing for your mortgage, right? Borrowing for a home, getting a mortgage. These are really good debts because these are enhancing the quality of your life for the long term, right? These will pay you back in spades. They're appreciating assets. Bad debt are depreciating assets. And also assets or things that you spend money on just for the purpose of mindless consumption. So what is that? Cars. You know, everybody says, right? The moment you drive a car off the lot, it's already depreciated. And so cars are depreciating, right? Clothing and consumables, things that you buy that don't in the short term make you feel good, but in the long term, they're not actually enhancing the quality of your life. And there's one more slide. Debt repayment. I just wanted to touch upon this briefly. There are people ask me all the time, oh my God, I'm in debt. I've got $10,000 in credit card debt. What do I do? And I always say, okay, there are two ways to do this. One is the avalanche method and one is the snowball method. Both of them are structured to help you pay off that debt quickly. Both of these approaches require that you choose one account. Let's just use credit cards. This approach works for all kinds of loans, student loans, anything, but let's use credit cards. So let's say you've got 5 credit cards. You're going to take one of them and then you're going to choose that one to pay off quickly. So the other 4 you would pay minimums on, and that 5th one could be either the one with the highest interest rate that you're getting gouged every month. That's the avalanche method, right? You pay off the credit card with the highest interest rate, and so all the money you're saving by paying off minimums on the other 4, you pile into that one, right? And then the snowball method would be that one credit card that you're going to pay off quickly is the smallest debt. Now, why choose one over the other? Well, it's mostly psychological. It's finance versus psychology. The avalanche method is going to allow you to pay less interest over the long term of these 5 credit cards. By the time you finish paying all 5 off, you will have paid much less interest than with the snowball method. The snowball method, however, allows you to knock off debt more quickly because you're paying off the smallest, then the next smallest, then the next smallest. And studies have shown that this psychological advantage of getting immediate rewards and getting encouraged because you're knocking them off keeps people on track sort of more effectively than with the avalanche. You have to be more disciplined with the avalanche because you're not going to see the immediate returns because you're going to be paying that high interest rate off a long time, right? So those are the two. One yields faster results, but one is slower, but one is cheaper than the other. So really it's up to you. It's, you know yourself, right? You know how much you cost. You know what kind of life you want to build. Which one is best for you? And I think that's it. I'm very sorry that I've kind of gone on a bit.
No, this is perfect. We can quickly transition to Q&A. Some of the questions have already started coming in. One is, I have debt. Should I pay off the debt first before I start investing?
That's a great question. So it depends. The answer is it depends. Depends on what kind of debt you have, how much debt you have, right? I would say that if you have very high interest debt, so a lot of credit card debt. I know people with $40,000 in credit card debt, and it's the interest rate is 19%, 24%. I would say that you put a very, very minimal amount of money towards your savings and your investment goals. So instead of 10%, maybe you put in 5%, right? 10%, we remember the 10% for your investments and 10% for savings, right? Maybe you want to cut that down and you want to put the rest of it towards your debt. I really think you need to start the habit of always investing in your retirement and in your goals. So don't ignore it. Just minimize it, and plunk as much money as you can on your debt, and commit to using any extra money that you get, like your taxes, if you get tax money back, or if you get a bonus, or if you get Christmas gifts. Commit that that money is already, you're not going to spend it on a holiday. You're not going to spend it on, the Gucci outfit that you want. You're going to spend it on your debt. So that's I hope that helps.
No, it does. No, that's awesome. The other questions that have come in touch a bit around credit. One is, balance transfers between credit cards a good move? Some companies charge fees, which is something to consider. And then the other question is, is it recommended to have more than one credit card? And then the last one touches on some of the points you raised, which is, what are the dangers of having a credit card?
Okay, so I'll answer those in reverse order. So the dangers of having a credit card, and in fact, I can pull that slide up, are numerous, right? I think for me, the most dangerous thing about having credit cards is really the false sense of my net worth, right? I think I can spend more than I actually have because it's sitting there on the card, right? The plastic versus cash syndrome. I think it's very easy to overspend, to live above your means. And that then becomes the vicious cycle, right? That is very, very hard to pull yourself out of. I've done this. I have pulled myself out. I won't even tell you how many thousands in debt when I was much younger. When I got my first credit card, I was like, woohoo, and I really didn't understand what the risks were. I didn't, my relationship with money was much more fraught back then than it is now. And so for the first time in my life, I had access to buying things. Oh boy, and did I buy things. And so the reason I'm very good with debt repayment is because I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way how to do this. And believe me, I went for a number of years without a vacation, without anything, because I was paying back that debt. So and the biggest risk is bad credit. If you're going to open credit cards, it's to create good credit. And if you don't manage them properly, you're defeating the whole purpose. So then the next question was, let's see, what are the risks? How many should I have? How many
credit cards should I have? And then also balance transfers.
Right. Okay. So, the number of credit cards is a really individual thing. It depends on how sophisticated you are with managing credit cards. You have to know who you are. Today I have many more credit cards than I did for a very long time. I had to go through a period in my life where I was cutting up my credit cards. Literally, when I would pay it off, I used the snowball method because I needed to kind of like see that I was getting somewhere, and I would pay it off and then I would cut it up. And so gradually, so I then, for a while, so that I could become disciplined, I started using my debit card. My debit card has a little Visa, right? So it acts like a credit card, but it's a debit card. And I only allowed myself to use a debit card for about 2 years. This is when I was in my 20s. And I became disciplined. I became, much more mature and responsible about my financial system, my financial structure. And then, with time, I was able to add credit cards that had different features that I need. Business credit cards, all those corporate, all those sorts of things. So the answer to your question is, you know what? If you can get away with 2, do it. But if you have 4, 5, it's not a bad thing. It's really a question of you deciding if you're capable of managing credit cards. And then balance transfers. So I use balance transfers. They're a very effective way of consolidating your credit card debt. And I didn't really talk about consolidation because we just haven't had time, but I know student loans are often also consolidated. Balance transfers allow you to put all all of your balances. Let's say you're paying off 5 credit cards. So what you would do is you would transfer the balances of 4 credit cards onto this one. This one is a credit card that is allowing you to not pay interest for, let's say, 18 months. So this then gives you 18 months to pay off, if you're very disciplined, to pay off your total amount without paying interest. Now, again, that's a slightly more advanced tactic for managing debt. But I think it's, if it depends on where you are, and I would definitely recommend I do it.
Okay, so we have a few questions coming through around income and expenses. One is, how do you budget for unexpected or irregular events? And then the second one has to do with saving for college tuition. My child starts college in 5 years. How do I prepare for the rising college expenses?
Okay, so I'll start with that one. We didn't talk in this presentation about college savings, because we're going to be talking about that in the 3rd webinar, retirement and college savings. But what I can tell you quickly is that you need to open what's called a 529 plan. And that is the most effective way of building up enough money, saving enough money. It's a tax deferred account. Again, we'll talk about this in the investments webinar. But yeah, I can tell you that. That is a long-term goal, and it needs to be invested, and you would invest it within a 529 account. And then what was the other question?
How do you budget for unexpected or irregular events?
Okay. So we have to, this is back to tracking your spending. So, what I call them the known unknowns. And I actually have a slide on this, and I'm sorry, we just didn't have time for all our slides, but the known unknowns are these expenses that come up unexpectedly, but not completely, it's not like we've never, didn't know that someday they might. So I would say unexpected medical expenses. I would say your vehicle registration every 2 years, or I would say a wedding gift that comes up out of the blue, or I would say, there are lots of things that we can't really budget for unless we have been tracking our spending. If we've tracked our spending over 2 years, let's say a year, 2 years, those things will have come up, right? Your car repairs. I just had a car repair of several $1,000s in January. Well, I budget for it. So how do I budget for it? I take and I add about 20% to my savings bucket. I live quite simply. So the things that make me feel rich and fill me with joy are things like getting magazines. So my expenses aren't huge. And so I'm able to put away a little more money. I budget more money in for unexpected expenses. Now, what you can do is once you build up, and then, so you can do that if you're able to, you can track your spending, and you will see patterns emerge, and you will know that every 2 years you have to budget for your vehicle registration, right? Also, I would say this is what your emergency fund is for. It is for if you lose your job, but it is for that big unexpected medical bill, that big unexpected car repair, right? And you can take it out of there, and then you cut your savings and you start replenishing the emergency fund. You see what I'm saying? So these are the ways in which you need to be nimble with your financial plan. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, definitely did. And building on that, there's a question in the chat, one around what percentage of disposable income should be fixed costs such as housing?
So that would be 50%.
Okay.
50%, if you go back to the 50, 30, 20 concept, Elizabeth Warren says that you would spend 50% of your disposable income for those needs, that sort of sustaining a life for yourself. Some people, more, other people say 60, between 50 and 60. I've read literature on that. Me, I've always lived quite simply. 50% for me is great.
So there's one that's pretty relevant to this audience. As a current Yale College sophomore, how do I start to budget?
Okay, so you would do exactly what we've talked about. That's how you start to budget. Step one, you figure out how much it costs to be you at Yale. How much is it costing you to be you? How much is your life costing you that you're responsible for? The next thing is you start tracking those expenses. You get yourself an expense tracker. There's an app that's right here listed under resources. There are two that I recommend. One is YNAB, you need a budget. The other one is Mint. I think Falaki, you said you use Mint.
Yeah, for years.
Yeah, and so these are, and so once you have begun to understand the patterns of your spending, now you can see how much of your spending is going towards needs, how much of it is going towards savings and investments and financial goals, and how much is going towards wants, your discretionary, your fun spending. And you can see then, right, what your spending is like and how you need to tweak it. Then you've got to sit down and think, all right, how am I going to start consciously spending? What does this mean for me? Who am I? What are my values? What do I want to spend money on? What do I love? What makes me feel joyful and rich, right? And what don't I care that much about, right? So all of you would follow the steps, because the earlier you do this in your life, this is an exercise. This will stay with you forever. This system that you put in as a sophomore, I get so emotional because I think if somebody had told me this when I was a sophomore, if somebody had told me, my parents this, my grandparents, right, my life would have been different. And this can make a huge difference in your life. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
No, Elisabeth, this is great. We have a ton of questions around retirement, investing, purchasing real estate, so much to cover. But the good news is we have 2 more sessions. So I'm not going to pose those questions in this particular session, knowing that we're going to cover those in details. But thank you so much for all the wisdom and the information you've shared. A lot of gratitude coming through the chat. Everyone thinks the information is very practical and awesome, and we're looking and hoping that the engagement continues for the upcoming sessions that we have planned.
Well, Falaki, before we go, I just wanted to I've put up the slide. Albert made these graphs of what everyone in the audience said was their fear around money. And we can see that the highest percentage is scarcity, right? We're just afraid, we're poor, we're afraid there's not enough. Gender roles, family, right? Vulnerability, shame. Boy, all these things I can relate to. And I'm really happy to see, right, that so does we're all the same. These issues cut across socioeconomic lines. They cut across cultural lines. Money is one of those things that and it's up to us. The good news is that we can heal our relationship with money. And this is the first step. The first step is recognizing that you have an issue with money. Is there another one? No. Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure that we saw that.
Okay. I'm going to jump in now and let's give Elisabeth and Falaki a round of applause for an absolutely outstanding kickoff to our series, to your series, Elisabeth, on financial management. And I know the next two will be fantastic: in April, investing, and in May, retirement. And everybody on this who've registered will get an email with all the sign-in information and what you need, just so in case you didn't save the registration for this one. But it's been our pleasure to host you, Elisabeth and Falaki, for a wonderful evening.
And
also,
Albert.
well, I'm going to
Albert is my right-hand man. I couldn't have done it without him.
Okay, I was doing Albert next because I was going to thank Albert, not just for being part of the presentation and helping you, but also being behind the scenes and helping us tonight. So we're really grateful, Albert, for your engagement, and look forward to seeing you in the next two programs as well. Again, I want to thank, in addition to Elisabeth and Falaki and Albert, I want to again thank our sponsors, the Yale Club of Washington, D.C. and Falaki. Thank you for being a representative. For the Yale Latino Alumni Network, David, for being a representative, and Yale Finn. You guys have been fantastic, as well as for Barb Petrosio and representing the 1stGenYale in Washington, D.C. chapter. So you guys are great. Stay tuned. If you haven't joined 1stGenYale, we're all over in social media, Instagram, Facebook. We have a Facebook group, Facebook page. We're also in LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn Careers, Connections and Jobs. And so join us there. Send an email to any of us at 1stGenYale at 1stGenYale.org for any questions or any follow-up. We'd be glad to be in touch. But I want to thank everyone for this evening tonight. And officially the evening is finished and closed. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.